I was 10, 11, 12, I don't remember, in line for the movies. And there were two guys in line in front of us, like 3 or 4 people in front of us holding hands. And my mother pulled me to her, not my siblings, just me, and looked at my father and said, "They're weird," which just made me look at those guys. And I went, oh, now I get it. I'm weird like they're weird. And I looked at them and I thought, they look happy, they look like they're in love. I'll be fine.
Inform brings you incredible stories.
I left 2 days before the revolution. It killed me so hard.
James has never experienced the taste of fruits that haven't been attacked by pesticides, just like he's never experienced a neighborhood that hasn't been attacked by bullets. Some things just go hand in hand.
People say what's on their mind.
I think that it is a cardinal sin to lie to the American people about war.
Partisanship is a version of narcissism.
In downtown San Francisco, the Commonwealth Club's Inforum curates events that bring you face to face with the world's changemakers.
1/3 of the wage gains that women have made since the 1960s were made as a result of the birth control pill.
Twitter is a technology that I don't think we've seen before in this world.
Since 1903, the most innovative leaders have come to the Commonwealth Club to share their vision.
Sharing cars, sharing their homes, sharing. A shared dream, a shareable American dream. That could work.
You each can play a role in helping us chart a better future.
Housing and health and education and policy all live close to the surface in us when our children are murdered. It's all the same story.
We bring together the visionaries shaping the emerging trends in technology.
It was a combination of Instant and Telegram. It was the idea that you could take a moment in time and you could capture it and you could just send it out and broadcast it with the entire world.
I just threw the site together in about a week when I was at school.
Oh, great.
We've got angels, we've got incubators, we've got accelerators, we've got seed funds, we've got crowdfunding.
We eat, we drink.
One of our first dates ever, we pickled like 100 pounds of herring and made 300 pounds of sauerkraut.
Yay! We never shy away.
75% of the people of this country want universal health care and expect it. And damn it, let's go.
Concentrated, deep, slow, loving, tender, passionate sex.
Whether you want to be on the cusp of current events or feast on pop culture,
I should have a great time writing it. I should write a book that is as fun as any party I'd be skipping.
Inform events are fun and action-packed.
I have an anthropology scarf that does that twisty thing, so.
Come feed your mind and soul and celebrate the future with Inform.
I love San Francisco, and every time I come back here, I remember that this is the only city in America that has magic. Hi everyone, I'm Crystal Contreras and I'm the director of Inforum. Thank you for joining us today for our virtual program with the Food Lab's J. Kenji Lopez-Alt and Tom Philpott, food writer for Mother Jones Magazine. This program is supported by the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative and a collaborative of local funders and donors. We are grateful for their support and hope others will follow their example to support the Commonwealth Club during these uncertain times. If you'd like to ask either of our speakers a question during this program, you can do so in either the comments or the chat section of the live stream. The Commonwealth Club has temporarily suspended in-person events, but to keep the public informed during this outbreak, we are going full speed ahead with a full slate of live online programs. These programs are currently free to the public, so we do ask that you consider making a donation to help us continue our work. You can visit us at commonwealthclub.org/online to learn more, and you can also text the word donate to 415-329-4231 during this program. Now, please join me in welcoming Kenji Lopez-Alt and Tom Philpott to Inforum.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this very special virtual program with Inforum at the Commonwealth Club. I'm Tom Philpott, food and agriculture correspondent at Mother Jones Magazine, and I could not be more delighted to be in conversation tonight with chef and food writer J. Kenji Lopez-Alt. Kenji is the managing culinary director of Serious Eats, author of the James Beard Award-nominated column, The Food Lab, a New York Times contributor, and the internet's leading chef scientist. And tonight we'll be talking about all things food in the COVID-19 era. If you'd like to ask either of us a question, please ask it in the chat if you're watching on YouTube, or in the comments if you're watching on Facebook. Let's get started. First of all, Kenji, thank you so much for joining us tonight. I am a huge fan of yours. I have learned so much from your writing, and I'm just delighted to be talking to you tonight.
I'm delighted to be talking to you too.
Now, what I really want to do is nerd out with you about home cooking, but there is this giant gorilla in every room right now, and it is the COVID-19 crisis, right. The ongoing COVID-19 crisis. And I think a lot of people are puzzling out, we're week whatever into this thing, and we're still figuring out what to do about food that we bring into our home. And you've written an amazing piece on Serious Eats about food safety in the COVID-19 crisis that everyone should Google and read. And I wonder if we could start by talking us through your protocol. You go to the supermarket, or you get your order from a supermarket delivery service, and the 6 bags of groceries show up. What is your protocol? What do you do?
Well, so I think as many people know by now, the main concern with the virus spreading is through person-to-person contact. So the fewer people you come in contact with, and the better distance you keep from people, that's your best way of staying safe. There's very low risk when it comes to virus that's been deposited onto surfaces, including food. So having a contact-free delivery system, that's very low risk. But going to the actual supermarket, that's a higher risk activity, and at least where I live now, the supermarkets have pretty good protocols in place. The better ones will limit the number of people that are allowed in the store at a time. They'll have markings on the ground outside for how far you should be staying away from each other, and I find that most people are respectful of those things. What I personally try and do to limit my contact with large groups of strangers is I try to go to the local supermarkets, the smaller ones. So instead of going to the big supermarkets where, so every supermarket has a pinch point, right? They have that doorway that people go through. And whether it's a supermarket that 10,000 square feet or 2,000 square feet, they still have basically the same size doorway. And so that's a point where a lot of everybody who's in that supermarket is going to be passing through that doorway at some point. And you're more likely to come into contact with the air that other people have breathed, with droplets that other people have let out. So I tend to go to the smaller supermarkets just because I know that there are fewer people going in and out of that doorway at any given time. And also, I have a young daughter, a 3-year-old daughter, and she's out of school, just like all kids, she's out of school right now. So so we do pop-up preschool 4 days a week, and mama preschool 1 day a week. And so when I go supermarket shopping, she's inevitably with me. And toddlers can touch things, right? They like to touch things. And so as much as I can control that, I'd like to, but I know that she's going to end up touching things, and probably touching her face afterwards. So, so I'm kind of hyper aware of as far as surfaces that a lot of people have come in contact with. So that's why I tend to try and go to the smaller supermarkets, just because I know that fewer people, a fewer total number of people are going to be going into there. And the fewer total number of people that you come in contact with, the less likely it is that you're going to be the less likely it is that you're going to be exposed to virus. The whole virus thing, it's all, everything is sort of a risk factor. It's not that option A is safe and option B is unsafe. It's just that everything is a spectrum, and every action you take has some amount of risk on that spectrum. And so it's a sort of a question of personal choice, like how much are you willing to risk in order to maintain some sense of normalcy in your life. Although we can get more into the details of that later, but I think that's the main thing to keep in mind through this whole conversation, is that there's no black and white. That's a safe thing. That's a not safe thing. It's really just a question of risk management and avoiding unnecessary risks when you don't have to.
Right. So in terms of risk management, it probably isn't necessary to, let's say, sterilize every can of tomatoes that you take out of the bag after you've been shopping. Like, you don't need to spray disinfectant on each one.
Well, so that's one of those things where, so that is one of those things where I think it really comes down to personal choice, because once it comes into your own home, it's like your time is yours, right? It's like what you decide to do with your time is yours, and so the thing to remember about a virus versus a bacteria is that a virus needs a host cell to multiply. So when somebody who say is infected with the coronavirus, if they sneeze on a can of tomatoes, the moment that they sneeze on that can of tomatoes, that's the maximum viral load that can of tomatoes is ever going to have. From there on out, it's getting smaller and smaller and smaller. It'll die off naturally. Assuming that we're considering viruses to be alive right now, which is a controversial thing in the world of virology, but it dies off naturally, and then also every time it comes into contact with other things. So when the person picks up that can of tomatoes and puts it on the shelf, when somebody else goes in the shop and handles it, it unlike a virus where unlike a bacteria, or certain types of bacteria where the more surfaces it's spread to, the more chances it has to grow. With a virus, the more places it's spread to, the more it's diluted. And so, the studies that we've seen have shown that active virus doesn't last that long on most things. It can last a few days on sort of organic pores. On metal surfaces, on hard surfaces, metals and plastics. A little bit less long on porous surfaces, woods, cardboard, things like that. And so, the chances that the can of tomatoes that's been sitting on that supermarket shelf and has been in transit, for a few days, it's probably only been in contact with a few people that were actually close enough to potentially deposit a viral load on it. And then and then you multiply that by the odds that they did it recently, and the chances are, and then again you multiply that by the odds that you're going to rub it, and then rub it into like your eyes or some place where it can get into your respiratory system, which is the place where you're most likely to get infected. The odds are very low that you're going to get it from a can of tomatoes. That said, if you have the space and it's easy enough for you to take your cans of tomatoes and put them in the garage for 3 days, where at that point we know that there's probably no transmissible virus on it left remaining. If you have the space to do it, then and you have the inclination, then why not? I'm not going to discourage anyone from being safe about things if they want to be. Personally, I don't. I wash my hands. I wash my hands as I cook. As someone who works in restaurants and who's worked in restaurants for 18 years, it's like a lot of food safety, like the hand washing thing is kind of just drilled into me, and I kind of do it automatically. I'm more lax about things at home than I am at the restaurant. But as long as you're following sort of basic good hygiene practices in general, like anything that would keep you safe from getting sick from other types of bacteria, norovirus, things that are much more easily transmissible, are going to keep you safe from this as well.
Right. And you make clear in your piece that viral load is a really big deal, and where you get really big viral loads are where lots of people are together in one place, and that's where all the outbreaks come from, and everywhere. In our meatpacking plants is a great example of that. And so we're not having a lot of outbreaks from random handling of cans of tomatoes that weren't sterilized.
None that we know of, right? There, in countries where they've had better tracking of the spread of the virus, we're woefully inadequate at testing in the U.S. right now for various reasons. But in countries where they've had better testing and tracking of the spread of the virus, so far there's been no indication that there's been any kind of foodborne transmission, and the transmissions that we know of all come from social interactions. So it could be like a church group, it could be a choir practice, it could be a conference, where a whole bunch of strangers get in contact with each other. Those are the situations where you really want to avoid, which is why social distancing has been the main thing that's been stressed, and why it's so important that we continue doing the social distancing.
And so for takeout and delivery of prepared food, it's pretty much the same thing. Once it's in your house, there's a vanishingly rare chance of getting a virus from it, as long as you just sort of maintain the usual hand washing protocols.
Yeah, so when I was writing my articles, I consulted with a whole lot of experts, but I specifically asked a few questions. So one of the questions I specifically asked to virologists and pathologists and food safety experts is, all right, let's say like worst case scenario, there's a cook at a restaurant who is infected with coronavirus. They don't know it. They're working and they're preparing my salad and they sneeze directly on my salad.
Okay.
And then they put that salad in a box, and then I get that box and I take it home. What are the chances that I can then get sick from it? And the answer is it's still very, very, very low. I mean, there have been no known cases of foodborne transmission, and the reason is because it's a respiratory virus. So more recent studies have found signs of viral activity in the gut, but it's not. But though there have been people who have experienced sort of gastrointestinal problems related to the coronavirus, there's no indication that there's any kind of oral pathway for infection. The pathways for infection that we know of are all respiratory. So, unless you're literally inhaling your hamburger and getting it into your lungs, the odds that you're going to get active virus and get infected by eating food is very low. Again, it's risk factors. Going back to talking about risk factors. So when you're eating food, your body prepares itself to eat food. Like just when you start, like right now, if you think about a hamburger or salt and vinegar potato chips, think about salt and vinegar potato chips, and you can feel your tongue starting to produce saliva, and you can feel your body getting ready. You're getting ready to accept food. And when your body is in this mode to accept food, the main job your mouth is doing is getting food from your mouth into your stomach. So your body produces more saliva, which means that whatever you put in your mouth gets wet faster and things start to break down faster. And so when you're ready to eat food, it's actually much less likely that you're going to be infected with a respiratory virus because your body is leading things down to your stomach. And as far as we know, the virus can't survive the acidic environment of your stomach.
Right. So this is all very reassuring about food handling and food production. And I mean, I think you basically summarize it as wash your hands a lot, don't pick your nose, avoid crowds.
Yes. I mean, I think that's the advice everyone is giving, which is, don't avoid crowds. Try as much as you want to. Don't throw that party or don't go to that party that your neighbors invited you. My neighbors have invited me to parties at their house, which I have politely declined. And it's tough, because we've been under lockdown for, 2 months now, maybe over 2 months now. I can't remember exactly how long, but it feels definitely like it's been over 2 months. It is everyone I think is starting to go stir crazy, but the reason why the infections have been lower in countries that have had good social distancing procedures in place is because it works. And as tempted as we are to say, okay, like it's not a threat anymore, look at that, it's not a threat because nobody's getting sick. Well, first of all, people are getting sick, but the reason why more people aren't getting sick is because of what we're doing, right? And so we need to, I firmly believe in the power of science, and I believe we need to continue trusting the scientists. Trust the scientists over the politicians for sure, but scientists, science is a method of understanding how things work, and it's a method of understanding the world around us. As fallible as science can be, it's still less fallible than just pure speculation and opinion.
Right. And so speaking of the advice to avoid crowds, you also own a restaurant, and I believe you're at your restaurant right now, Wurst Hall. And I want to talk a little bit about restaurants. I mean, restaurants are number one in an industry that thrives on social contact. And I haven't been to Wurst Hall yet. I hope to someday, but I imagine when it's sort of at its funnest, it's sort of shoulder to shoulder, big steins of beer, sausage.
Yes.
And so I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about what is going on, right now at Wursthall, what you're up to,
Yeah.
what it looks like these days.
So yeah, so you are right. So our restaurant is modeled after German beer garden. So yeah, so we have communal tables that seat 40 people shoulder to shoulder. And on a normal night pre-virus, we were we would have 200 people in here shoulder to shoulder. And so when the virus is, of course, obviously we shut down all, but in fact, before the shelter in place orders in California and San Mateo County came down, we closed down service, and we switched initially to a takeout only model, which is what a lot of restaurants are doing. Then we actually stopped doing takeout because right now the biggest at least in San Mateo County, I don't know how it is in the rest of the country. I know some states have reopened and some counties have reopened. San Mateo County is actually reopening in a couple of weeks with some strict measures in place. But the issue at most restaurants now is not necessarily the customers, but it's the staffing and the density of the staffing. Because as much as you can tell a restaurant, hey, like, make sure your cooks stay 6 feet apart, the reality is when you're busy, you can't, right? And so restaurants right now, a lot of them they're considered essential food businesses. So if you like in San Mateo, at least, or in San Francisco, if you go into a fast food restaurant, they're staffed almost as densely as they were before, right? There's people working 3-4 feet apart. And with us, it's like we were trying for a while to we cut down on staffing a lot. But the issue we ran into is that despite the shortness of staff, people still wanted their lunch between 11 a.m. and 1 p.m. and they still wanted their dinner between 6 p.m. and 8 p.m. And so we had these big rushes, and during the rushes, cooks would forget about the social distancing and they would start walking back and forth past each other. They would pass things to each other, and so whatever safety protocols you put in place, it was very difficult to enforce them and get people to follow them. And so we actually we cut down. So our issue was that we were too busy, and so we got completely cut out takeout business because we didn't want to. We didn't want our workers getting sick. And of course, there's always it's always that balance as a business owner and an employer. It's like, on the one hand, it's like your cooks want to work because they need the hours and they want the pay. And despite the fact that there's unemployment, as we all know, like a lot of restaurant industry people, back of the house especially, are not eligible for unemployment for various reasons. So they want the hours, but at the same time, it's like you can't ask them to work and put themselves at risk and be sick. And then it's like, I also don't want to put myself at risk by calling in all these employees and coming into contact with them, put my whole family at risk. So what we've done at the restaurant is, early on we started doing community outreach. We started finding places in the community that needed food. So community centers. So we work a lot with the Samaritan House in San Mateo, and a whole number of hospitals, and everywhere, actually, all the way down to Gilroy to San Francisco. So we work both directly with those hospitals and community centers, and also through an organization called Off Their Plates, which works under World Central Kitchen, which is Jose Andres's organization. And so early on, we started requesting the community to give donations so that we could prepare boxed meals for hospital workers and for people, the people who are most affected in the community by this. And by doing that, it actually has allowed us to staff better than we could doing normal service, which means that we can space because we're doing boxed meals as opposed to a small takeout window of time. We can space our staffing out so that people can definitely work in a safe manner. What that's going to translate once restaurants start to reopen, which we're planning on doing in 2 weeks for takeout service initially again. We're going to have to keep an eye on it, and we are, what we found actually is that this whole process of closing down and reevaluating what we're going to be doing in the future has actually it's given us a lot of insight into ways we can sort of manage our operations better, and also what we're going to be doing in the future, because I think it could be years before or maybe, who knows, maybe never, maybe things are never going to be, if you believe the worst projections, things might never be the same as they used to be. We might never be able to serve 400 people here a night, because of the risk of restarting a pandemic. So we're sort of operating under the assumption that this is going to be a semi-permanent thing, at least a few years. And so as a business, we're exploring other alternatives, like how we can generate revenue streams. So retail, more boxed meals, ready to eat meals, more takeout service. We're exploring meal kits, so like raw product that we package in a way that people can, so it's sort of like the Blue Apron or Sun Harvest model, but where people will do it locally. We've also been doing like a series of online classes where people can cook along. So like we just did me and my sous chef Eric, we just did an online class where people could buy tickets, and then they get like a package. They come to the restaurant during certain time windows and get a package of pork belly and curing salts and everything. And we run an online class where they learn how to make their own pancetta at home. And we're going to do a sausage making class next week, etc. So it's really, as a business owner, like we've had to pivot. I'm sorry, I think that's my phone beeping. I apologize. We've had to pivot a lot, and the biggest concern for us really is like how do we survive as a business? It's how do we survive as a business, and then how do we make sure that our employees can survive as individual people? And both of those things, they obviously play off each other. Without a business, we can't pay our employees, and without our employees, we don't have a business. It's difficult though, yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's been very tough, and specifically very tough figuring out how to keep our employees whole.
Yeah, and when you come back, will you be at like 50% of service, or will it be takeout only? Or
we're going to start with takeout only. The other thing we're doing is that we're working with the city to down San Mateo right now. Like we're trying to convince the city to do. To close off streets to traffic, because there are less cars going around now, but close off streets to traffic so that restaurants can have outdoor space that will compensate for some of the indoor space they lose. For us, I think our main actually bottleneck is going to be density of staffing, because whereas we use, us, like every restaurant, I think, our staffing density is probably going to be about half of what it was before. So we used to have, on a busy Friday or Saturday night, we have six people on the line, and they'd be working 3 feet apart. Now in the future, we're only going to have 2 to 3 people on the line, and we're going to have to figure out, more creative ways to keep our staff employed that isn't just working on a busy Saturday night.
Right, and so it's sort of looking at new models, like adding basically food processing and retailing to a restaurant model. And I guess it's sort of like seeing your kitchen as an asset. How else can we transform ingredients into food for people that they'll buy in this kitchen?
Yeah, it's that. The other thing is, because I'm in my restaurant right now, you can see it's like, it's a big space. It's like I don't know what the total I think it's like 14,000 feet is the square feet is the total space of this, and it's like, what are we going to do with that whole space? So that's something we've been brainstorming also. And it's like, I can show you, like we have a bar, right, where normally there would be 10 to 12 seats, and in the current situation, we would only be able to fit 2 seats at the bar. So it doesn't make sense to keep it as a bar. So we're doing things like considering transforming that into retail display space. It's going to be a lot of. The restaurant industry is going to hurt. it's going to hurt a lot.
Let's talk about that, because the federal government, in some places, like I was just reading about in Denmark and in Canada, businesses of your scale, 0.5% of their payrolls made by the government. None of this kind of paperwork and stuff like that, having to apply for unemployment, et cetera. And then you also have in a lot of most industrialized nations, your employees would all have healthcare as a matter of course, and you wouldn't be shelling out any money for healthcare for them. They wouldn't be shelling out healthcare. And then we have our country where we had this incredibly convoluted CARES Act that came out with this intended payroll protection plan. And I wonder if you could just talk through, as someone at the sort of spear's edge of it, like how all of that has worked out for you. How have you seen the government response go? And what would you like to see from the government?
So there's a number of factors here. So with the payroll protection, the way the way I understand it is that, when the employees that we had working before, as long as they're reemployed by June 1st, there's protection. But we're, from everything we've seen, we're not sure whether that, it seems like it's basically just loan forgiveness, but we're not sure if that forgiveness is ever coming, and we're not sure if we're following all the rules that are going to let us claim that forgiveness. And so so for us, and I think a lot of other small business owners I've talked to, they're treating it basically not as a forgiven loan, but just as a loan. So we're doing our accounting and our and planning for our future, assuming that at some point in the future, whatever we receive from the government, we are going to have to pay back at some point. And if we don't, great. But it's such a it seems like such a convoluted process that we're not sure. And then there's the other issues. In this country, in California alone, there's 2.5 million undocumented workers, right? And many of them are in the service industry, and those folks aren't covered by unemployment. And so it's like, it's for us, it's a question of like, so given that we can't rehire everyone, there simply isn't the work to do for everyone, as much as we would like to rehire everyone. It's like, who do we start to rehire first? And do we base that based on what we think we're going to get back from the government? Do we do it based on who we think is going to need the work most? The people who aren't getting unemployment right now, which is another tricky issue in itself. It's like, how do you find out who those people are without blatantly asking them? Because of course they all have paperwork, right? Like it's, they all have the required paperwork, but you still don't know whether the paperwork required to get a job is not the same as the paperwork required to get actual unemployment benefits.
Or that check from the government too, undocumented folks were cut off from that $1,200 stimulus.
Yeah. And so to address that need, we've been very vocal about, and to all of our employees, if we're preparing all this food for healthcare workers, for community centers. If you need to come in, or if you want to, we don't say if you need, but if you want to come in and get meals, like, you are welcome to come in and take meals. Just like, let us know and we get them for you, which some people have taken advantage of, not too many. Yeah, I mean, we're currently operating under the assumption that that we are going to have to pay back any kind of any assistance we're getting from the government in the long run.
That seems incredibly unfair to shut down an industry for a public health crisis that the industry had nothing to do with creating, and require them to shut down, and then impose this kind of uncertainty on owners.
Well, it's unfair to the small businesses. I think it's really more aimed at the sort of larger restaurant. It's like McDonald's probably doesn't have to worry as much as Worst Hall does, where their money is going to come from in the future. It's like it really feels that the restaurant industry it's not a good business to be in. First of all, like if your goal is to make money, like, restaurants are not the place to do it, because you're operating under razor thin margins in the first place. And oftentimes, for us, like, it's like the first several months of our operations until we really sort of fine-tuned operations. For us, it was like the more customers we had, the more money we were losing. because it actually cost us to feed people even after they paid their whatever amount for $14 for a chicken sandwich. I don't know can't remember what we're charging for it now, but whatever it is, it's not cheap to operate a restaurant, and profits are razor thin, and so to then place that kind of uncertainty and say, hey, we're going to help you, but maybe we won't. Like it's and asking you to take that risk is it doesn't seem like something that a nation like the U.S. should be doing, but but here we are.
Yeah, and then you layer on top of it, because I find all of this just mind-boggling. Obviously, social distancing is terrible for restaurants. And then when you lay on top of it that we may be entering the mother of all recessions, I mean, we're in a recession right now. And to avoid a depression, like a 1930s-style depression, we're going to need some kind of big government program that doesn't appear to be coming. And so now you guys are also looking at a recession, and people, when there's 30+% unemployment, people go out to eat less. They have less money kicking around to spend on sausage, out at the bar. And so, how do you deal with that?
For us, I think we are lucky on a national scale to be I mean, we're in the Bay Area, and at least for now, at least for now, it seems like most of the families and customers that come to our restaurant are okay. It's like people in the tech industry are still working. They're able to work from home. They're still making their paychecks. They're still making their exorbitant salaries, and they still have money to spend on food. And it's also like, I think we do well as far as community outreach and so personally, I strongly believe that, like, doing good as an individual and doing good for your community, even if there's no way to calculate what that's going to bring back to you, that as a business, like, doing good is always the right move, both from like just a general, being a good person standpoint but also just on a pure business standpoint, which is sometimes hard to convince investors and hard to convince partners. But I think, like, the proactive stance we've taken in trying to reach out to our community, making sure that the people who are affected by this in our community are being taken care of, and and we're feeding them as best we can. I think, in the end, like, for us as a business, that's also going to help, because people like to spend their money at places where they feel good spending their money, and they want to know that the money that they spend is going to be going towards helping a business that helps their community. And so, for us, I think we're lucky in that we have a relatively large platform, like a marketing platform, social media, whatever, where people hear about us, and people in the community know about us. But I think all that, that I say lucky, but in the sense that, but that's also, taking into consideration that you make your own luck in these things, where it's like, the more proactive you are about these things, the more community support you're going to have. And so, I guess I'm saying, like, as an industry as a whole, I think, we're in the industry's in a lot of trouble. I think we in particular are in a very lucky position, and in a very fortunate position, both in terms of geographically and demographically, as well as, like, sort of the reputation we've built for ourselves to be able to weather. We've done everything we can to be able to weather the future storm. But even so, we're worried, and if we're worried, then I can't imagine how many other restaurants are feeling who aren't as as advantageous as a position as we are right now.
And so you're looking at a future, at least in the near term, of sort of transforming on the fly into kind of a food production hub that has various channels of putting it out. And I think that's an interesting model for the industry to go into.
Yeah, I mean, it's also going to be a competitive model, and it's like, it's not, we're not like cutthroat competitive, but it's like one of our main strategies is going to be that we're going to try increasing sales to people beyond our neighborhood, right? So it's like eventually we want to do mail order retail. We want to do classes that people across the country or across the world are going to want to join. And so it's like looking at revenue streams. It's like we know that as a business, to survive, like we're probably going to have to look outside of our immediate locality for revenue streams to survive as a business. And so as soon as you start doing that, then you're it is competition. It's like every there's only so much room in the world for online sausage making classes, right? And it's like, if you're trying to market to everyone in the world, then you're competing with all the local the local places too. And it's not like we don't think about it in like we have to put those guys out of business, but it's like we have to try and make our business succeed as much as possible. And if there's something that we can do that people want to, that brings value to people's lives, then we're going to try and put out there, whether that's mail order, sausages or whatever, or online classes. But I mean, I think, the good news is that no matter where it comes from, people have to eat, right?
Yeah.
People are still going to be eating. And so that might mean that, maybe in the short term, supermarkets are doing much better now than they did before. Because people aren't eating out at restaurants as much, and they're getting more food at home. The economy is all going to shift from one place to another, but at some point it's going to reach a new equilibrium, and the number of mouths to feed on the earth is continuously going up, and people are still going to have to eat. So as long as you find, as a business, as long as you find a way to reach those mouths, and you go about it a smart way. Yeah, I mean, I hope we'll succeed at it.
Yeah. So do we. And I have got you talking about the restaurant business, but what so many people know you for is streamlining home cooking, rethinking home cooking. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about your quarantine, your sort of household quarantine cooking regime these days. What sort of stuff you're cooking in your house with your family? And particular, a couple of people asked me, to ask Kenji, how does he avoid, especially in this time when we're all, like maybe you have a sort of house recipe that you do maybe once a month, but now that people are cooking every night in the house, maybe that you're doing it once a week now and you're getting tired of it and people are falling into ruts.
Right.
So if you could talk a little bit about how to, keep from falling into a rut.
Oh, I mean, I can tell you how I do it. I don't know how useful that's going to be though. So for me, it started in college. It's like, when I was in college, I lived in a co-ed fraternity, which is where my wife was in the same fraternity actually. And that's how we met.
I didn't know they had this.
Yeah. There's a few of them. We were a national co-ed fraternity, and, Delta Psi, if there's any of you out there. But we were also about 80% international students. And so in college, after my sophomore year, we ended up, I was a house manager then, and we ended up firing our cook because he was doing cocaine off the piano and stealing steak. Anyhow, for a variety of reasons, we fired our cook, and we had trouble finding a new one. And so I was like, I'll cook. And so I ended up cooking for our house. And during that time, what I tried to do was on weekends, I would, for all the weekend meals, I would spend a week talking with one of my housemates from a foreign country about a food they missed from home, and learn as much about it as possible, and then try and cook it. And so that to me, that sort of to me triggered like an ongoing lifelong love affair with learning about cultures through food. So for me, like the way I don't get bored by cooking the same thing is that I find learning about other cultures through food to be sort of endlessly fascinating. yeah, so on my free time, I like to read about food from other places, and then I think about it and I cook it, and I try cooking it. And I think you know what I think the real take home is that so here's an example. The one time there was a few British exchange students at MIT at my house, and they were talking about toad in a hole, which is sausage cooked in a Yorkshire pudding. I had no idea what a Yorkshire pudding was. I'd never heard of it, no idea what it was. And they're like, oh, it's kind of like a batter that you pour into a pan and you bake it. And so I was like, okay, I'll make a batter and pour it into a pan and bake it. And so I made basically like a pancake batter, poured it into like a metal hotel pan and stuck a bunch of sausages in it and baked it. And it came out like nothing like a Yorkshire pudding, which I didn't know that. I mean, it came basically like, it was like basically like cornbread with sausages in the middle. Okay. Nothing like a Yorkshire pudding. But it was still tasty. It was still edible. It was still good. People ate it. And I learned from that experience. And so the take home is that one thing that I think puts people off from trying new things is that they're afraid that they're going to mess them up. And they're afraid they're not going to do justice to them, or they're afraid they're going to embarrass themselves by cooking something that isn't exactly how it's supposed to be. And I feel that I'm sort of actually guilty in making people feel that way, because from the way some people interpret my recipes, which tend to be very precise, they interpret it saying like, if you don't do it this way, it's not right. Like it's the wrong way to do it. Like Kenji said, cook your steak this way, and if you do it any other way, you're wrong. Which is like the opposite of how I want people to feel. I think the first step to diversifying your repertoire is to not be afraid to screw things up, because it's really, really hard to make something that's literally inedible, right? It's like, I can think like maybe you completely burn it and you don't want to eat it because you're going to get one bite is going to instantly give you cancer, or it's so salty that you can't possibly eat it. Those are like maybe the only two ways I can think of that you would completely ruin something. But we all get the chance to cook we all eat 3 meals a day, or most of us do. We all eat 3 meals a day, which is 3 chances to cook new things every day. And it might be 3 chances to mess things up, but that means you can try again the next day 3 more times. And eventually you're going to get it right, So it's like, if you find yourself in a rut cooking the same thing, then just stop, right? It's just cook something else and be okay with the fact that the first time you cook it, it's not going to be all right. It's probably not going to be perfect. It may never be perfect, right? But it's going to get progressively better each time you cook it. And so if something interests you, just go for it and don't be embarrassed by messing up. I think that, people are frequently their own biggest critics. And especially it's like when you put a lot of work into something, it doesn't come out as like exactly how you pictured it in your head. It's really easy to put yourself down. But most people, it's like sometimes people tell me they're shy to cook meals for me. It's like, I'm not judgmental. I mean, it's like, I'm very happy no matter what you make for me. If the point of food to me, it's like, if you get people together around a table, you get the family together around a table and you're talking and you're enjoying each other's company, then like the food has done its job, right? It's like, once you're past the basic sustenance level, if the food brings you together and allows you to have conversations, I mean, we're having conversations about food right now, but if it opens up conversations and it connects you with people, then, that's sort of the job of food, right? That's, I think, the cultural job. It's why we eat, and it's why we share meals, and why we love to sit around a table. And so as long as you're all talking about it, and you're having fun, then like, who really cares if the food came out perfectly? Right. And if it didn't come out perfectly, then that's like a topic of conversation, right? It's like, you can talk about why it didn't come out well and what you can do next time to do better.
And you can just put salsa on it, and you can just sort of use condiments to dress it up, and it's going to be fine. One question I had to squeeze in before I go into Q&As is that what I find so fascinating about your work, and what I've learned so much about it, is that you seem to specialize in taking classic dishes and then asking, do we really have to do it this way? And you try to get the same result as the classic dish, but you find different ways of doing it. Like, I was just watching one of your videos recently where it was one of these moments where I'm like, I can't believe he's doing that. And then I saw the logic of it. and that was you were sauteing off some pancetta that you had chopped up, and you said, well, you know, classically you might put some olive oil in first, and but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to put water in. I was just like, did a double take, and I was just thinking about this Marcella Hazan, you know, Essentials of Classic Italian Cuisine, a classic cookbook. And she would just, you know, I mean, I, you know, cooked out of that for 15 years, and she would rebel against that. But then when you explained it, it made sense, and I can't wait to try it out. And I wonder if you get pushback from people saying, like, I had a friend, I was using the low water pasta method, which I've been using for a good while now. And a friend who might be listening tonight said, you know, I can't believe you do it that way, because she knows that I love Italian food. She says, how can you do it that way when the Italians don't do it that way?
Right.
Isn't that? And I'm like, well, it's actually better because you get such a rich pasta water.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
I'm wondering if you get pushback like that, and how you answer that. That you're producing the same results, but you've tweaked the way to get there.
I mean, it could be the same results, or it could be different results. You know, I mean, sometimes, you know. So, if going to the example about like cooking pancetta. So, you know, the three ways you could do it would be to do it naked in a pan, where you do it kind of low and slow at the start to render out some of that fat, so that you have some medium to fry in, which is a fine way to do it. It takes a little bit of time. You could add a little bit of oil, so that you have, you know, like olive oil, whatever you want, so you have that medium already to start with. That's a little bit faster. Yeah. Or you can do what I think I did in I was making pasta alla gricia in the video. The video you're talking about, where I start with a little bit of water, and what you do is you put the pancetta with water, and you let the water evaporate, and then as the water evaporates, some of the fat melts out. The other thing that happens when you do that, though, is some of the protein seeps out of there also, so you end up with fond in the pan, you know, so that when you then deglaze it with pasta water, the you get it you know, the results are different. You get sort of a darker sauce, and so it's a question of like, which one do I prefer? And you know, very very frequently what I find is that, you know, so asking those questions, like, is it better to do it with water, or is it better to do it with oil? It's like asking, like, which is the better Beatles album, like Rubber Soul or Revolver? And it's like, it depends on your mood, right? It's like, I felt like doing it this way today, so I did it that way. I feel like doing it this way another time, so I'm doing it that way. But yeah, you know, I think you find that especially in countries that have a very hyper regional and rich food culture. So Italy would be the prime example. People do tend to get very defensive about the particular way a certain thing is done. But what you sort of have to eventually realize as a outsider is that just because someone in a country says this is the way they did it, like, so, you know, the interesting thing about Italian cuisine is, like, you can ask five Italians, and depending on what part of the country they're in, or even if it's like neighboring towns, they do things differently. You know, it's like, so really,
different
it's like
dialects in neighboring towns.
Yeah, it's like, do I trust like what this one specific person's grandmother says, or do I just do it the way I like it and be okay with it? You know, it's like, I mean, I think it comes down to questions of like authenticity and tradition, and I think as long as you sort of understand a food culture, I think if you understand a food culture and you understand why people do things a certain way, then you are totally free to do it your own way. I mean, even if you don't understand it, you're free to do it your own way, of course.
Yeah.
But you get a lot more street cred and a lot more leeway if you say, hey, this is the way that it's traditionally done, but I'm not doing it because I feel like doing it this way. Your reasons don't have to be, I'm doing it this way because it makes the proteins coagulate differently. Like, your reasons don't have to be scientifically backed like that, you know, or have any of the jargon in it. It could just be, the reason I'm doing it this way is because I felt like doing it that way.
Right.
It's funny because I have a and this is going to sound like a plug because it is, but it's perfectly relevant to this conversation, which is that I have a children's book coming out in September called Every Night is Pizza Night, and it's about a girl who thinks that pizza is the best food in the world, and therefore she's only going to eat pizza every night. And then the book is her about learning how the concept of best, learning about the concept of best and how there's different bests for different situations, and that it's all sort of a matter of personal taste and is sort of a situational thing. And so just because pizza is generally the best food, which it is, of course, doesn't mean that there can't be other bests out there as well.
Okay, I'm going to jump into a couple of lightning round great questions from the audience out there. And this one comes from Catherine Koo, and she asks, what are the 5 ingredients that you always make sure to have on in your pantry fridge for quarantine cooking? Like, what are 5 things that that you can't do without?
Okay. Olive oil. Well, that seems like a cop out. All right. So, all right. Microwavable trays of rice. Like Japanese rice, they sell brown rice and regular rice in trays that you put in the microwave for 90 seconds, which I use probably a couple times a week. Because my daughter, her favorite breakfast is tamago kake gohan, which is rice with eggs, rice with a raw egg that you stir into it. And she requests it all the time. Sometimes she has it for dinner, and those things make it super convenient. So I would say microwave rice. I would say cans of tomatoes. Because there's so many things you can do with cans of tomatoes. Plus, we also make pizza once a week. Eggs, because eggs have like an extraordinarily long shelf life. You know, it's like at least 2 months in the fridge, probably even longer. So you can stock up on eggs and have them. And like basically anything becomes a meal if you put an egg on it. It's like I can have random vegetables and then I poach an egg and put it on there and it's a meal, right? I have toast and put a poached egg on it. It's a meal. Like anything that you add an egg to becomes a meal. How many am I at so far?
I think we've got eggs, olive oil, that
eggs,
special
olive oil,
rice.
Yeah. 2 more things. Well, we always have. My wife has frozen pepperoni pizza hot pockets all the time.
Okay.
You know what? Cheese. I mean, I always have some kind of cheese. It's things that last a lot, that I can go to the supermarket and buy once and they last a long time. And you know what? Surprisingly, we actually do a lot of. I think we've been eating actually even more fresh produce now than we normally do, and it's because at least where I live, like farmers markets are actually a very safe and convenient way to shop. I mean, you know, I used to go to I did used to go to the farmers market, you know, a couple times a month, but now we go every weekend, and they've actually been very good about, you know, you're out in the open air, so it's less densely packed than a supermarket would be. You don't have to worry about running into, you know, being in the supermarket. You have that like pincer attack where there's like 2 people coming at you and you're stuck in the middle of the aisle, and you're like, oh no, what do I do here? And you feel like you're in a video game trying to avoid. In the stealth level of a video game, but at a farmer's market, you have lots of space to move around, so you can make space if you need it. So I would say, yeah, fresh produce, honestly. And maybe that's like totally just a California bias, but I'm sure it is. But we have lots of fresh produce all the time right now.
Okay, I think with Hot Pockets, that gets us to 5.
Right.
Another one is from Nicole, and she wants to know what your go-to comfort food is. And also, I think this is a great question that she adds on. What is the most interesting thing that you learned while writing the Food Lab? And I just want to tweak the question, that second question, to say, what is the biggest bit of conventional received wisdom about doing something like you need a giant pot of salted water to boil pasta? What is the biggest thing, conventional wisdom thing, that you've been able to debunk? But first, talk about comfort food.
Comfort food. Well, that would probably be some kind of So mapo tofu is my favorite food in the world. But that's the other thing we always have. We always have tofu at home, like a lot of it. We always have tofu because I know that if there's tofu is like one of those things of like, I mean, everyone in my family loves it. I love it. My wife and my daughter all love it. Like my daughter's favorite food is tofu and fish heads and broccoli for some reason, but tofu. But so comfort food for me would be Japanese style mapo tofu. So not the Sichuan style that's like very oily and spicy, which I also love. But my mom used to make mapo tofu. So the food that I remember making most when we were kids was dumplings. Like, so once a month or every 2 months or so, like the 3 kids, me and my sisters, would sit down and we would fold dumplings while we were watching TV, and then we would put them in the freezer and we'd have dumplings. And so my mom would make the filling, and then with whatever filling was left over, She always used beef because I think that's what was most inexpensive at the time. She would take the leftover dumpling filling and then make her own version of mapo tofu with like the dumpling filling that she would saute, and then sake, soy sauce, mirin, sugar, and tofu. And we called it mapo gorp because it had a gorpy texture. And so I still make that for my daughter and for myself sometimes. And that is that's my comfort food. Mapo tofu with rice and furikake.
And can we find a recipe for that online from you or in your book?
No.
Can you
But
write
I should
one
put it
for
up there.
us?
Yeah, I should. I'll put it up there. Yeah. I'll put it on my YouTube channel or in Serious Eats at some point.
That would be
maybe next week.
fantastic.
And I mean, things I learned writing the Food Lab. You know what I find interesting is the so the idea that acetic acid sorry, not acetic acid, ascorbic acid, lemon juice or lime juice makes your guacamole not turn brown. So
I think that I have to admit.
So it does in great quantities, but the amount that so in the testing I did, the amount that you add to the amount that you would reasonably add, even at the higher end of it, doesn't actually affect your guacamole very much. But what does hugely affect the color of your guacamole, and I say this is something that I've researched while I was writing the Food Lab, but I never made it into the book. I don't think I've written about it anywhere actually, but the thing that really seriously affects the browning in your guacamole is salt. So if you salt your avocados and you salt your guacamole while you're making it, it turns brown much faster. So if you know you're going to be pre-making the guacamole and serving it later, don't add salt, like stir in the salt at the end instead of sprinkling at the beginning. And it's like a night and day difference. Oh, and another one is the eggs. Boiled eggs. So I've written about this a number of times now, but the main factor when peeling your egg, when it comes to being your boiled eggs being peelable, is the temperature of the water that you lower them into. So if you lower them into already boiling water, they peel much better than if you do them the way I was taught, where you slowly bring them up to a boil.
Right.
If you slowly bring them up to a boil from cold, the shells fuse. To the eggs fuse to the shells. If you lower them into already boiling water, then they are much easier to peel, and that's also like a night and day difference.
Okay, so let's just keep going with that. So once they're lowered in the boiling water, how long do they stay in?
So well, it depends how you like them.
Right.
Yeah, it depends. Like 3 to 4 minutes is super soft. Like 7 to 9 minutes is medium. Like it kind of has like a fudgy yolk. And like 11, 12 minutes is hard. Beyond that is like turning green.
Right.
But it also depends on the size of your eggs and the altitude and all that stuff.
Right. Okay, so it depends.
Yes.
Let's go to another question from the audience. This is a good one, and you can take it how you want to. From Alex Lennox. What book had the greatest impact on your life? And you can talk about a food book or a not food book.
What book had the greatest impact on my life? I would say the first Calvin and Hobbes collection, the Essential Calvin and Hobbes, followed by all the other Calvin and Hobbes books. I mean, I feel like my life philosophy has been largely based on Bill Watterson's life philosophy, which he expresses in those comic strips. Yeah, I would say Calvin and Hobbes.
And how about in the food realm?
In the food realm, it would be probably probably on Food and Cooking, McGee's book, or potentially Jacques Pepin's Techniques book. Yeah, one of those two.
A question that I wanted to ask you that I'll squeeze in now is, have you ever dug into some classic preparation that's really specific in its directions and its techniques, and found that actually they got everything right. Everything was actually optimized.
Oh yeah, actually frequently, so yeah, so I get this, I think I sometimes get this reputation that like I'm the guy that debunks things, and it's only because the articles where you debunk something are so much more popular than the ones where you don't, right? Like that like saying, hey, we've been doing this wrong the whole time, and here's the science that proves, like, here's the testing that proves it. Like, that's a much better headline than, yeah, it turns out we were right about that. And so I would say, I mean, 95% of the time, you find that either the classic technique or some version of the classic technique is the way to do things. And it works great. And it's also like, classic techniques are classic for a reason, and the reason is because whatever the reason it is that they work, they work, right? And so you can sometimes find better ways to do things, or you can sometimes say the reason why this works is not the reason why we thought it worked. But it's rare that you're going to find a classic technique and say no, this doesn't work at all, right? It's like that. If it didn't work at all, then people wouldn't be doing it. So I would say most of the time when something's been done for 100 years, it is probably going to work for the next 100 years.
Okay, I have an interesting one from Lexi Helming. She says that you've said before that it's important to both freeze things and thaw things rapidly. And I had the same question. The freezing makes sense, but curious about the thawing part, because I always thought that if you're going to thaw some meat out for a meal, you should think ahead and, today put, the pound of burger or the steak or the pork chops in the fridge. And so tomorrow, by the time you're ready to cook, they'll be nice and thawed. But is that not right?
So no, okay, so that is right. But so I guess more than rapidly, it's more so evenly is the important part. And with thawing, it's easier to thaw evenly than it is to freeze evenly. But so yeah, I guess I should qualify that. It's really most important to freeze things rapidly, which means that you want to pack them sort of as thin as is reasonably possible. So like with ground meat, like you want to flatten it in a bag. If you're gonna freeze like a bunch of chicken breasts, you want them to be in a single layer instead of piled on top of each other. And it's because like when you freeze things, water forms crystals, it expands, and so that means that like the outer parts of the food are expanding while the inner parts of the foods are still at the same size, and so that ends up tearing cells, and so then when you thaw it in the future, liquids rush out. But that said, if your food is in a shape to be frozen rapidly, which it should be, then it is going to thaw. I mean, they go hand in hand. It's like freezing and thawing are two sides of the same coin, right? So it's like if you're optimizing for one, you are already optimizing for the other. So when I say thawing rapidly, I'm really talking about thawing evenly. And it's exactly. So thawing in the fridge is better than thawing in boiling water. Yeah.
Okay, I'm happy to hear that, because it's something I've been doing all my life. So. And it is kind of fun this thing that you've been doing all your life. Suddenly you learn a new way, and it's great. But I'm relieved that's not one of them. Okay, now
I'm actually very glad you asked that question, because I never really thought about it from the perspective that you're asking it. Like I guess like from the way I phrased it, it would make it sound like, oh, it's better to like boil the meat that you're trying to thaw than to and I never thought about it from that perspective. So yes, it makes. I'm glad you asked that question, because I can be more clear in the future.
Okay, well, we're about out of time, but now is the time to go to the Inforum tradition that we ask all the speakers here. And that question is, what is your 60-second idea to change the world, Kenji? Clock is ticking.
So my response is going to be super cheesy, because I have a 3-year-old who I spend a ton of time with, and she's like learning about the world right now. And, so I think compassion for others and self-compassion are the most important things. It's especially self-compassion. It goes back to that whole idea of like being okay with making mistakes when you're cooking food. I think, being open to other people and being open to other cultures and understanding other points of view, like, starts with you being okay with putting yourself out there and being okay with failing when you do things, and understanding your own flaws, and understand, it's very easy to put yourself in sort of like a defensive shell and say like, all right, like I don't need to deal with these other people because like I have my way of doing things. And I do, I'm very guilty of this. I'm first to admit I'm very guilty of this, like especially like online when you're in contact with all kinds of people. It's very easy to get into your own shell and to start feeling sort of self-righteous about your own perspective and point of view. But I think self-reflection and realizing that your point of view is not always the right one, and that there are other perspectives out there, and it's okay to be wrong in your perspective, and it's okay to then admit that you were wrong in past actions, or even in current actions. I think is how we're going to have to move forward as more and more people populate the earth, and as the internet becomes a stronger force. Being compassionate to others starts with being compassionate to yourself, I think. So that's
excellent advice. And I want to thank you so much, J. Kenji Lopez Alt, for joining us today at Inforum at the Commonwealth Club. And if you want to watch more virtual programs or support the Commonwealth Club and their efforts at making virtual programming, please visit commonwealthclub.org/give. I'm Tom Philpott, along with my little dog, Jack, and we want to thank you for listening in and wish you all, including you, Kenji, to stay healthy and safe out there. Thank you so much.
Thank you.